celebration of the 25th Battalion's departure from Spring Bluff Railway Station on the 17th of March 1942. It appears there's a bit of a buzz in the microphone, so I'll have to bring out the school teacher voice from a few years ago, but hopefully you can all hear me very well. We're going to invite some invited guests now, and the bugler will play the long G. So if I can introduce Eddie Kemp, and then we'll hear from our band. Thank you very much. Welcome again on this momentous day as we celebrate 80 years of our forefathers walking down that same hill and getting onto a train on 1942, 80 years ago. Can I begin today by acknowledging the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands that we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal and Jarrawa people, as well as the Yuggera and Yuggerapul people. Can I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I have a fair few welcomes and thank yous today, and I will read the full list because I think in present company is a justified use of time. Can I welcome the families of the men of the 25th Battalion. I'd like to make a very special mention today, while there are many families, of Serena Sutherland, who has travelled from Melbourne to be here today. Serena is the daughter of Captain Malcolm Just, and this is her first time at the Spring Bluff commemoration service. Welcome, Serena. Can I welcome our fellow members of the Spring Bluff Railway Trust Management Committee, Toowoomba Regional Councillors Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and Kerry Shine, Lockyer Valley Regional Councillors Brett Polashevsky and Rick Vella. Can I welcome Mr David Rees from Queensland Rail, and of course our committee secretary, Claire McGovern. Can I welcome the Toowoomba Regional Council Mayor, Paul Antonio, Deputy Mayor, Jeff McDonald, and Councillors Carol Taylor and Melissa Taylor. Can I welcome our Lockyer Valley Regional Council Mayor, Tanya Milligan, Councillors Janice Holstein and Michael Hagan. We have a fair few members of our Defence Force today. Lieutenant Colonel David Fraser, who is the Commanding Officer, 25th and 49th Battalion, Royal Queensland Regiment of Greenbank, and his Regimental Sergeant Major, Warrant Officer, Class 1, Michael Young. Can I acknowledge Major Lachlan Rich, Officer Commanding A Company, 25th and 49th Battalion, Royal Queensland Regiment, Milne Bay Barracks, Toowoomba, and the soldiers of the battalion today. Can I acknowledge Padre Brenton Fry, Chaplain of the Oakey Army Aviation Training Centre, who's here as well. Can I further acknowledge the member for Broome, Mr Garth Hamilton MP, the member for Lockyer, Mr Jim McDonald MP, members of the 25th Battalion Association, and there are a few of them around, the Harlexton RSL Brass Band, who are behind me, have already done a tremendous job and will continue to do so, as well as representatives from Murphy Street State School and the GM State School. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the public, welcome. With every good welcome, I must do some apologies. And apologies have been received from Councillor James O'Shea, the Chair of the Spring Bluff Trust Committee, former Regional Councillors Rebecca Bonhoff and Nancy Summerfield, CEO of the Toowoomba Regional Council Mr Brian Kitchen, Colonel David Lynch, Commandant Oki Army Aviation Training Centre, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Pike, Commanding Officer 7th Signal Regiment, Borneo Barracks at Zabala, the Member for Wright, Mr Scott Buckholz MP, Member for Toowoomba North, Mr Trevor Watts, Member for Toowoomba South, Mr David Chinesky MP. With our thank yous and apologies out of the way, we'll start this morning's commemoration service by singing the hymn, Nearer to My God to Thee. Would you please be upstanding as we sing, Nearer My God to Thee. Thank you. Brass band. Are you hearing me all right without the microphone? There are a few other speakers now, and I trust they also have no problem speaking rather loud. I'd like to call on a councillor from Lockyer Valley who also sits with me on the Spring Bluff Advisory Committee. Can I call on Councillor Brett Polashevsky to speak on behalf of the Trust Spring Bluff Station Trust Management Committee this morning. Thank you, Councillor Brett.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning. My name is Councillor Brett Polashevsky from the Lockyer Valley Regional Council, and I'm one of the members of the Spring Bluff Railway Station Trust Committee. And I'd like to welcome you all here to celebrate and commemorate this solemn moment as we proudly remember the significant event of the soldiers of the 25th Battalion when they left Spring Bluff Railway Station preparing to fight for our country 80 years ago. This commemoration has always been and will continue to be recognition of the service and the selflessness of the men of the 25th Battalion. On this 80th anniversary, it is heartening assurance that this commemoration will continue by our community now and into the future. Whilst we can appreciate the peaceful surrounds of Spring Bluff that brings us all together here today, it would have been a very different story 80 years ago when the troops of the 25th marched down the steep range into the pitch black of night and gathered on the station platform, mixed with emotions of fear and anticipation and excitement. They would have had a little idea what lay ahead of them. In fact, I'm told they had absolutely no idea where they were going outside of Brisbane. They would have had a little idea that they would be the ones who ultimately would face the previously invincible Japanese army. Our troops faced them, stopped them in their tracks, and won the battle. Tragically, more than 200 of the troops who departed from the station 80 years ago did not return from the battles with Japanese forces at Milne Bay in 1942 and Bougainville in 1945. It is inspiring to think that this little station had such an important role in what would eventually lead to the defeat of the Japanese army in New Guinea. And that this is why the Spring Bluff Trust Committee, comprising Toowoomba Regional Council and Lockyer Valley Regional Council and Queensland Rail, is extremely proud to hold this commemoration service each year. It is wonderful to see the family ties that bring us to this commemoration. The widows, the children, the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, together reliving the history of our region and remembering the selfless service and bravery of the men of the mighty 25th. We are honoured today to welcome soldiers of the 25th and 49th who have today retraced some of the steps of their forebears. I'm sure you carry the memory of your brothers with you. The 25th Battalion's motto is never a backward step, and our nation would not be the free and prosperous society it is today without the sacrifice of those who fought for this country. The battalion gave selflessly so that we, the future generations, could enjoy our lives as we do today. Sadly, the term hero is bandied around these days without consideration of its true meaning. These men epitomise the true meaning. A person distinguished by exceptional and distinguished courage and ability and fortitude. May we honour the sacrifice of these heroes today and the generations to come. lest we forget.
Thank you, Councillor Brett, for your speech and touching words. And can I acknowledge that some of us walked down the trail today on similar footsteps to our forefathers 80 years ago. Some of us took the train, but if we're dressed nicely, we probably came on the train, and if we're in clothes that look like we walked down a hill, we probably did. So, look, those who made the journey this morning down the hill, well done on doing so. I've done it. It's a lovely walk, but it is quite steep, so well done on that effort. I'd now like to call on Lieutenant Colonel David Fraser to speak, Commanding Officer of the 25th and 49th Battalion, Royal Queensland Regiment. Please come and address us.
Mayor Paul Antonio, Mayor Tanya Milligan, all councillors, members of the Spring Bluff Railway Station Trust Management Committee, descendants and families of the originals of the 25th Battalion, special guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. I especially acknowledge Indigenous servicemen and women who served before and who currently serve. Today we gather to remember an event that occurred in this location 80 years ago on St Patrick's Day 1942. At 2 AM soldiers of the Darling Downs 25th Battalion assembled at Kabala to march down the range to this railway station. From here they entrained to Brisbane. They assembled in Chermside prior to moving to North Queensland to be part of the defence of Townsville. 4 months after departing Spring Bluff, they would fight in the Battle of Milne Bay in New Guinea. The first time in the Second World War, the enemy were defeated on land. In 1945, the 25th Battalion saw war again, fighting on Bougainville in the Solomon Islands. Their combat experiences during the war would be described by historians as high-intensity action and heavy casualties. Today we remember these men. They represent us. They were from the Darling Downs. They were our brothers, fathers, uncles, husbands, sons and friends. As part-time militia soldiers, they were of and from the community. They were from the land, from the villages and the towns. Among them were men who had been farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, labourers, miners, bookkeepers, tradesmen. They had been mobilised to fight an existential threat, transformed into professionals in our nation's hour of need. Our country was scared and facing an uncertain future. These men were part of a larger group whose actions put an end to that fear. Of those who got on the trains in 1942, 200 never returned. We honour their sacrifice. We are proud of them and all who served. They fought for our freedom. Although some had doubted their courage, through their actions and sacrifice, the men of the 25th Battalion demonstrated Anzac spirit. Values including mateship, selflessness, belief in something bigger than yourself, overcoming adversity, resilience and sense of humour. The nature of their task can be recognised in the poem The Milne Bay Militia and the poetical works of Private Louis Johnson, the 25th Battalion, published in 1942, which I read now. Away to the north of Queensland, on the tropic shores of hell, stand grim-faced men who watch and wait for a future none can tell. No morning sunshine met their gaze, no streets with cheering crowds. In this land where fever stalks unseen and death drops from the clouds. For this is war where life is cheap, where humans' feelings fade, where deeds of valour pass unseen in the jungle's swampy glade. And then came stern reality through smoke and flame and heat, through drenching rain and slimy mud, where death went with defeat. But through this greatest test they came, with the foe completely routed, and cleared a nation's anxious brow, courage some had doubted. So remember this, the Anzac blood is in us all. It sleeps, but never dies. This last phrase resonates with us here today. It is a message that all of us have Anzac spirit within. It may appear dormant, but it rises to the situation when needed. We acknowledge those who today walk down the hill and who gather here, including our currently serving soldiers, and especially those descendants of the originals of the 25th Battalion. Events such as today are important, so help us remember the sacrifice of those who have gone before us. We thank the following for enabling today: Queensland Rail for the train, a challenging task given recent rain and flood. Ms Claire McGovern and Toowoomba Regional Council, Bugler Mr Eddie Kemp, Spring Bluff Railway Station Management Committee Trust, Toowoomba RSL Sub-Branch, Carl Laxton RSL Brass Band, and soldiers from the 25th to 29th Battalion Royal Queensland Regiment. Finally, thank you to all who have gathered here today. I'm sure the originals who walked down the range to get on the train to go away to war will be chuffed by this morning's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel David Fraser, for your time, your service, and for your speech. And when I reflect on those words every time, it makes the hair stand up that it was a bunch of young lads from the Downs who formed part of the 25th that were the same people who went over on a boat they didn't even know where and helped defeat the Japanese in their first ever land defeat. And that's our forefathers, and that's something we ought to be proud of. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to a part of the service now where we will be standing up for a short amount of time. We'll go to the Lord's Prayer, followed by a hymn and into the ode. And if you can stand up for that much of the service, you're very welcome to. If you need to sit down during, I certainly won't be disrespectful nor will anyone here. But further, if I could call on please Padre Brenton Fry, Chaplain, Army Aviation Training Centre Oakey, to lead us in the Lord's Prayer. Please be upstanding, please, Padre. May I please call on Marika Eldridge to come forward. Marika's grandfather, Warrant Officer John Eldridge, was in the 25th, and John's son Chris penned this poem in tribute to his father and the men of the 25th. Thank you, Marika.
My father wrote this poem as a tribute to his father, John Eldridge, and his uncle, Wes Wood, and to all their fellow brothers from the 25th. And I'd like to thank the organisers for graciously allowing it to be read today. I understand that it may be hard for some of you to hear, so I will leave a copy under the arbour if you'd like to read it later. Footsteps of men marching. They marched away, full knowing they well may not return. Yet bravely they marched onwards, each hiding his fear mixed with discern. Their footsteps didn't falter, each man prepared to give his life, leaving countless loved ones, to many, both kids and loving wife. They left, each one not knowing that they would never be the same, with minds adversely affected, for war is not a game. But they refused to be beaten, to let fear rise to rule the day. They chose to josh each other, as dauntless, they marched away. And we, all those now living, have a debt we can't repay. So with pride, we do pay homage, never forgetting, come what may.
Thank you, Marika, for your words. Can I also thank Mr Eddie Kemp for his work in the last post and the routes prior to that. Ladies and gentlemen, that now brings us to the national anthem today. If you could you please be upstanding as we sing our Australian national anthem.